Three girls went to a forbidden river looking for adventure, but only one came back alive. And the strangest part? The money they killed each other for was never even real. Ugh, the same stream every single day. This village is so boring, nothing new ever happens here. Look, we're just getting water. We aren't on an adventure. Hey, let's go to Mmiri Nso instead. No way, I am not going there. Are you seriously still scared of those old wives' tales? You know, when they finally came back to the village, they thought they had only been gone for a few hours. But the truth was, the villagers had been looking for them for a whole week, 7 full days, and by that time, 2 of them were already gone. To this day, nobody can explain what actually happened at that river. But you want to know a secret? It all started with something they found. So stick with me until the very end, because this story definitely didn't finish the way anyone thought it would. Once upon a time, in a quiet village, 3 young girls were sent out on a simple chore. Their names were Adas, Uche, and Marauma. They were best friends. They grew up in the exact same village, walked the same paths, and did almost everything together. On that specific day, each girl put a clay pot on her head and left home, just like they did every other day. Their mothers had sent them to the usual stream. It was a safe, normal place to get water. Literally everyone in the village used that stream. But as they were walking, Adais started to complain. The same stream every single day. This village is so boring. Nothing new ever happens here. Look, we're just getting water. We aren't on an adventure. Let's go to Mmiri Nso instead. Now, Mmiri Nso was the forbidden river. Everyone in the village knew about it. Kids were always warned to stay far away from it. Young girls were warned even more strictly. For years, people had told creepy, strange stories about that river. Some people even said that anyone who went there carelessly never came back the same. Some people said the river liked to keep things. Others said that if you touched anything near that water, you would lose your peace of mind. Maraoma quickly shook her head. I am absolutely not going there, she said. Adais teased her. Are you seriously still scared of those old wives' tales? Maraoma replied. No, I'm just not going. Those aren't just old stories. Even my own mother warned me about that river. Uche chimed in. Our mums warn us about literally everything. They warn us about roads, rivers, trees, and even shadows. Do we really have to be scared of every single place they mention? Marauma argued back. Even if nothing is actually there, if someone spots us, we are going to be in big trouble. Uche agreed. You're right. We have to be super careful. Adais shrugged. Nobody is going to see us. We'll just go there, look around, maybe fetch some water, and come right back. It's not like we're planning to sleep over. Marauma was still not convinced. But Araeze was bold, and Uche was really curious. And a lot of times in life, curiosity gets even stronger when a little bit of fear is mixed in. Adis kept pushing until the whole idea started to sound totally harmless. Let's just go and come right back, she said. At least we will finally see the river with our own eyes and stop living on rumours. Maraoma looked at both of them and made the exact same mistake a lot of people make. She knew it felt wrong, but she didn't want to be left out. So she agreed. And just like that, the three girls left the safe path and headed toward the forbidden river. The road to Mmiri Nso was totally different from the regular path to the village stream. It was much narrower and way quieter. The deeper they walked, the thicker the bushes became. The air even felt different out there. It wasn't hot and it wasn't cold, it was just strange. Without even realizing it, they all started speaking in softer voices. The familiar sounds of the village faded away behind them until the only things they could hear were rustling leaves, distant birds, and their own footsteps on the dirt. When they finally got to the river, they stopped in their tracks. The place was absolutely beautiful. That was the first thing that threw them off. It wasn't ugly and it wasn't creepy. It really didn't look like a dangerous place at first glance. The river was completely calm and wide, with dark, still water, and tall trees stood all around it like silent guards. The whole area looked completely untouched, like a place people had learned to stay away from for a very good reason. For a few moments, the girls just stood there looking. Nothing happened. There were no weird noises, no sudden movements, no warning signs at all. Slowly, they stopped being so afraid. Adie's was the first one to laugh. "So, this is the place everyone is so terrified of?" she asked. Uche looked around carefully and said, "Yeah, it really doesn't look bad at all." And Marauma didn't say a word. She still had a really bad feeling deep down in her chest, but she couldn't quite pinpoint what it was or explain it. So, when the other two started walking toward the water, she just followed them. After all, standing there all by herself at the edge felt way scarier than moving forward together. They set their clay pots down on the ground. Then they stepped closer to the water. Before long, they were splashing each other, just like little kids. They laughed, teased one another, and totally lost track of time. The chore their mothers had sent them to do didn't matter anymore. The village warnings didn't seem like a big deal anymore either. For a little while, it just felt like harmless fun. But then Uche noticed something. "Wait," she said. The other two girls turned around to look. Right there near the riverbank, half hidden by the roots of a tree, was a leather bag. It looked heavy and old, but it also didn't look like it had been sitting there for a very long time. Instantly, Marauma's heart sank. "Leave it alone," she warned. But Adaze had already made up her mind. She reached out and pulled it out. It ended up being way heavier than she thought it would be. Uche moved in closer. "Open it," she urged. Marauma shook her head. "No, we really need to leave it right there." Adaze completely ignored her and opened the bag. Right then, all three girls froze. Inside the bag were stacks and stacks of cash. It wasn't a small amount of money. It definitely wasn't the kind of pocket change a kid would hide away in secret. This was real money, a ton of it. It was more cash than any of them had ever seen in their whole lives. Right next to the money, there was a pair of cream-coloured clothes, folded up very neatly. For a few moments, nobody said a word. Then Adaze whispered, "This could literally change our lives." Uche was staring so hard at the bag that she couldn't even answer. Marauma was the first one to find her voice again. "This is bad," she said. Adaïs snapped around to face her. What could possibly be bad about money? Marauma replied, It doesn't belong to us. Uche finally spoke up. Well then, whose is it? Nobody had an answer for that. Marauma suggested that they should take it straight to the village elders. Adaïs refused right away. If we give this to the elders, they're just going to take all of it and then punish us anyway for coming to this river. Uche looked at the bag, then at Adaïs, and then at Marauma. If we tell anyone at all, we're going to have to explain exactly where we found it. Marauma still didn't want anything to do with it, but Adaïs had already made up her mind. She said that this was their big break. She said that opportunities like this don't happen twice in life. She even said that only foolish people throw away a blessing just because they are scared. And that was the exact moment their real trouble started. They had absolutely no idea, because what they took away from that river wasn't just a bag of money. The walk back home felt completely different from the walk there. Before they found the money, they were laughing and having fun. Now they were dead silent. Each girl was completely lost in her own thoughts. They were already daydreaming about what they could do with their share of the cash. For Adaïs, it was her ticket out of poverty. For Uche, it meant a comfortable life and a much better future. But for Marauma, it just meant pure fear. She wasn't excited at all. She just had a heavy, sinking feeling that everything had gone wrong the very second they touched that bag. Adaïs was the first to break the silence. We need to split it up. Uche nodded and said, Yes, right now. Marauma hesitated for a second before she spoke up. Can we still just put it back? She asked. But the answer came without any words. It was right there in the sharp looks Adaïs and Uche gave her. And in that exact moment, Marauma realized they had already gone way too far. They stopped at a hidden spot in the bushes. They put down their clay pots and opened the bag once again. This time around, the money felt totally different. It felt more real, more serious, and way more dangerous. The plan was supposed to be simple. 3 girls, 3 equal shares. But the very moment they started counting, Marauma stepped to the side and everything changed. Count it properly, Uche barked. I am counting it properly, Adaïs snapped back. You're rushing. Adaïs looked up at Uche with pure anger in her eyes. Do you honestly think I'm trying to cheat you? Marauma finally broke in and said, Let's just count it together so we can keep the peace. So they started all over again, slower this time and much more careful. But something new had already crept into the moment. Suspicion.
Every bundle of cash suddenly felt uneven. Every pile looked wrong. Every single move felt like someone was trying to hide something. When they were done, they set up 2 shares. Marauma had already made it completely clear that she wanted absolutely no part of it. Dividing it into 2 shares meant a ton of money for each of them, but they still weren't satisfied. Mine is smaller, Adaïs complained. No, it's not, Uche answered. They look exactly the same, Marauma added. Adaïs shook her head. No way. If I hadn't suggested coming out here, none of us would have found this cash in the first place. That doesn't mean you deserve to get more than us, Uche said. Adaïs countered. I was the one who actually had the courage. Uche stared right back at her. No, you're just the one with greed. That word just hung heavy in the air. Greed? Say that again, Adais challenged. You heard me, Uche snapped. Please, just stop it, Maraoma begged. The argument didn't turn into a full-blown physical fight right then, but the tension was already rising fast, like bread baking in an oven. They packed up the money and kept walking. But now, each girl watched the others completely differently. They didn't look like friends anymore. They looked like people standing in each other's way, fighting over something they refused to lose. After walking for a bit, Uche noticed something off. What is that? She asked. It's nothing, Adais answered quickly. Open it up. No. Marama felt absolute terror rise up in her chest. Then, all of a sudden, a bundle of cash slipped right out from Adais's wrapper. Uche completely lost her temper. You thief! You took extra? You took more for yourself? Adais didn't even answer. The fight broke out without any warning. They pushed each other. They grabbed at one another. They screamed over each other's voices. During the struggle, Adais grabbed a thick stick and swung it. Uche screamed out in pain as it hit her arm. For a split second, everything paused. But it wasn't over. The fight only got uglier. Stop! Please just stop! Marama cried out. Let's just leave the money behind. But nobody would listen to her. By that point, greed had completely taken over. Being fair didn't matter anymore. Trust was totally gone. And even their scary, evil fears weren't enough to pull them away from the cash. That was just how powerful the greed had become. It held all three of them completely trapped in its grip. When they finally reached the entrance of Mmiri Nso, the crossroads where the path led back to the village and the main village river Adais spoke up again. We can't bring this into the village, Adais said. Why not? Uche asked. If anyone catches us with this, we are totally finished. People are going to ask questions. Someone will definitely report us to the elders. Let's hide it first. Not too far from where they were standing, there was an old, abandoned hunter's shack. It was broken down and completely forgotten. They took the money inside. The air in there was dry, completely still and heavy. There were some loose wooden planks covering parts of the floor. They lifted them up and stuffed the money underneath. Then they just sat down. Nobody moved. None of them trusted each other anymore. And as darkness slowly started to surround them, the end was coming too. The three girls stayed inside that abandoned shack as evening turned into night. The whole place was dead silent. The air inside felt suffocating. Every single one of them was exhausted, starving, and terrified. But still, nobody wanted to walk away and leave the money behind. After a while, Adais stood up and announced that she was taking her share and hitting the road. Instantly, Uche jumped up too and warned Adais that she wasn't touching a single thing by herself. Marama begged both of them to just stop it. She told them they should just leave the money behind and go back home. But Adais refused. She said this money was her only ticket out of poverty. Uche also made it completely clear that she had no intention of leaving empty-handed. By that point, the truth was staring them in the face. All three girls had completely changed. The money had totally destroyed their friendship. Adais bent down and ripped up the floorboards again to pull out the hidden cash. The exact second the money came into view, Uche lunged at her. Adais grabbed onto the bundles. Marauma tried to step in and break them apart. All three of them ended up wrestling at the exact same time. They shoved and pushed into each other inside the tiny hut. During the absolute chaos, the old lantern fell over and shattered on the ground. A small flame started to burn. At first, it didn't look like a big deal, but then it began to spread fast. At that exact same moment, the bag slipped out of their hands.
It fell right down into the open hole in the floor. For a split second, everyone froze. Then, Adais reacted first. She dove straight into the hole. Uche jumped in right after her. "Leave it alone!" Maraoma screamed at them. But they completely ignored her. Inside the dark hole, they scrambled around frantically. They pushed each other, searched wildly, and grabbed at the scattered bills. Right above their heads, the fire spread rapidly. The flames caught the dry wood of the shack. Thick smoke began to rise. "Get out of there! Come out!" Maraoma screamed. But the deeper they reached into that hole, the harder it became for them to leave it behind. The heat grew intense. The air became thick and suffocating. The roof right above them started to weaken and sag. Maraoma stumbled backward. She took one last look down into the hole, but the flames had completely taken over. She turned around and ran out of the shack for her life. The wood above cracked loudly. Dust rained down. Then part of the roof completely collapsed. Just like that, both Adais and Uche were gone. Only Maraoma was left alive. She ran all the way back to the village, crying and shaking uncontrollably. But when she arrived, something felt totally wrong. The air felt strange. The people who saw her didn't look relieved at all. They looked absolutely shocked. Women rushed over to her. Men gathered around quickly. One of the men grabbed her by the shoulders. "Where on earth have you been?" Maraoma struggled to get the words out. "We just went to fetch some water." "Fetch water?" the man asked, bewildered. "You guys have been missing for 7 whole days." When the men followed Maraoma back to the burnt shack, what they found completely terrified even the oldest elders in the village. The bodies of Adais and Uche were right there. They were badly burnt, but they didn't look like girls who had just passed away that same evening. The fire looked like it had happened a long time ago. The bodies looked like they had been lying there for days. Everything looked completely off to Maraoma. Their bodies were supposed to be inside the hole beneath the ground. Instead, they were just lying cold right inside the main room of the hut. She was so confused. How did they even get out? She thought to herself. This left her completely puzzled. Then she turned to the men and said, "Look for the bag. It has to be around here somewhere." They searched the whole hut. They checked under the broken floorboards. Maraoma pointed straight into the hole. "Right there, the bag. The money must still be in there." The men just looked confused. "What money?" one of them asked. "We don't see any bag here." A heavy silence filled the air. Maraoma looked down at her hands, completely insisting. "This is the bag we found at Mmiri Nso. This is the money that turned us against each other. This is the money that ended my friends' lives." She fell to her knees, crying her eyes out. But the people around her still looked totally blank. "What bag? We literally don't see any bag." She stood right back up, acting like she was lifting the bag. "This bag? What do you mean? What bag?" The villagers looked completely puzzled. In that exact moment, the truth became crystal clear. The money had never been real. What they had seen, what they had fought over, and what had ultimately destroyed them was never actually there. She had lost her best friends over something that didn't even exist. From that day on, Maraoma was never the same again. She survived, but she carried the weight of that day in her heart for the rest of her life. She was the only one left alive to tell the tale. And whenever she shared the story, she always ended it with the exact same warning. The river they went to, Mmiri Nso, which actually means cold water, was no ordinary river. It had been sitting there long before the village was ever built, and the elders always used to say that it had a special way of looking straight into a person's heart. Not everyone who stood by that water saw the same thing. Some people saw what they feared the most. Some saw what they had lost, and others saw their deepest desires. What shows up near that river isn't always something that someone physically dropped there. Sometimes it's just something drawn out from deep inside your own mind, something that feels real enough to touch, real enough to fight for, and real enough to completely destroy you. That is exactly what happened to those girls. They didn't just find a random bag of money. They found a reflection of what their hearts were already holding on to. And when greed took over, they couldn't tell the difference between what was real and what was fake anymore. So they held on to it tightly, fought to the death for it, and lost absolutely everything because of it. In the end, the river didn't actually destroy them. It only showed the world what was already hiding inside their hearts. Not every single thing that looks like a golden opportunity is meant for you to keep. We have to be smart, use good judgment, and always remember that only honest hard work and consistency bring real success.